Good morning, team. Good afternoon. Good evening, wherever in the world you are. Today, we've got our fourth week in a row with George Wilmore and Aaron Sarles today. What we're doing, this is a four-peat with George. What we're talking about here on Flex Friday is basically what we do is we tie up the week's current events when it comes to sports. And today we're going to start off, we're going to talk about the NCAA Final Four men's and women's. We'll talk about the exchange between Gino and Don Staley that everyone is talking about. We're also going to talk about the new coaching job at UNC. Came here from Denver, and he's taken over that job. And then with Michigan, congratulations to the Wolverines. Did they buy a championship? Are we ever going to see a repeat or a three-peat in college basketball? Or because of the NIL and transfer portal, people are going to jump as soon as they get that ring? So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with George. George, I want you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Those that are just joining us, you've been with us for 4 weeks in a row. We can't thank you enough for your time and your expertise to join us and give us your input and feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. 4 weeks in a row. We got to keep it going. But
right.
My name is George Wilmore. I'm NIL director for Elevate Sport Group, former college basketball coach. So I know the landscape of NIL. I know what it takes to, get to the next level. And so I'm happy to, expand this platform with you all. And I love sports, just talking about sports, being in the know of sports, from anywhere from basketball to gymnastics, cricket, golf. I'm going to watch it. So if it's competitive, I love watching it and talking about it.
Awesome. Aaron, a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an avid sports fan. I'm a sports mom, and I co-created Blueprint to Blue Chip with Thomas. We want to restore some character in the sports space, so I'll keep it brief and short.
Awesome. All right, cool. So let's get into the first topic. Obviously, we're going to talk about it. While it might be old news, everybody knows what happened in the Final Four. We have to recognize and acknowledge the fact that Arizona was robbed.
Is that what happened?
All truth be told, George, I want to get your input on that. Leading up to the Final Four, everyone knows I went to Arizona. I'm a big Wildcat fan, as well as there are so many Americans. Arizona didn't show up. I mean, they got beat like a number 16 seed to a number 1 seed. They were never in the game. In the entire season, they were dominant. What do you think happened, George?
Michigan's good. That
clearly
they were a complete team. They're huge. They pass the ball. They play to their strengths. They run up and down the court. Like, their bigs are 7 feet, but they can get from rim to rim at a great rate. And so when you're constantly putting pressure on the rim, when you're constantly both the offensive and defensive side, that's going to be hard to beat. And so, other than Elliot Cano, they had size in every position. And so when you have that, you're going to reap the rewards. And so shout out to them. Shout out to the recruiters. Shout out to Coach May. He's won everywhere he's gone. And so they were just a better team. Yep. Arizona, great team. No disrespect to them. Coach Lloyd's going to do a great job in years to come. But Michigan, they were the better team throughout the entire tournament.
No question. Aaron, what are your thoughts on how Arizona was robbed?
Okay, the robbery of the Arizona Cats. Well, guys, you should have showed up and played well. I think part of it too is age. I think that they were a young team. That there's a lot that goes into being prepared mentally to perform at the highest level, and not that they weren't, but they hadn't really been tested throughout the season. And so when adversity strikes, they didn't know I don't think they knew how to respond because it wasn't something familiar to them. And so I think there's more that you have to prepare your teams for, because if they haven't faced that, what if, they had 2 losses. Kansas was a great team as well this year. And so I think for me, my assessment was, I think it was, there were a lot of freshmen, I believe, that were starting. George, correct me if I'm wrong. I just think that inexperience kind of caught up with them, and then they didn't know what to do.
Interesting. George, we talked about it before we started rolling the episode. is Michigan, do you think there's ever going to be a men's college basketball back to back or repeat or three-peat now with the NIL and portal, where a lot of these kids, like let's take Florida, for example, a lot of these kids won the ring last year and then they just took off to greener pastures. What do you think is going to happen with Michigan? And I guess this is kind of a 2 or 3 part question. All of those starters at Michigan were playing at another school last year. So did they buy a championship? Is this going to be the new trend, or are we going to see a repeat or a three-peat?
That's a good question. First off, the Tar Heels letting go Elliot Cadeau was crazy. You know, I loved him when he was with the Tar Heels. But I don't know, you know, and so there's so much money going out of NIL now. A kid can get $5 million at one school, win a national championship, and go and get $6 million at another school.
Sure.
You know, the school may be not as good as the school that you were at previously. And I think if student athletes are continuously chasing money, then no, you may not see a 2P, a back-to-back or 3P. But if your morals and your values start to change, like, hey, yes, I want to get this money, but I also want to play for this coach. I also want to leave a legacy. Maybe let's go and do back-to-back. Let's go try to get a 3P. And I think if a 3P happens, it will be with a roster of guys getting NIL, but also veteran guys. Guys that, you know, maybe the 7th, 8th man is not getting as much NIL, but they are a really, really good basketball player. They're really good teammates, and they're elevating some of the other players who are playing a little more. But, you know, Michigan could repeat. But with the NIL landscape, you never know. And the portal's open. We'll talk about that, but you just never know.
Yep. What are your thoughts, Aaron?
I don't know if they necessarily bought a championship, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but it does beg the question of, like, what are we instilling? And, you know, I think the other question I have is this sustainable for these programs to be spending this amount of money if you're not winning championships? How does that, like, I have a very business mind. So I'm like, what's your return on investment if you spend $20 million and you're out in the first round, or maybe you didn't even make it to the dance? And so it's definitely changed the landscape. And I know that there's more coming in the NIL space, because obviously I think people see this opportunity to be regulated. But I think I love what George brought up about we've got to focus on the bigger picture. You know, what coach am I playing for? How can I learn under them? Those are things that you get to take with you in life forever. The money will come and go. The lessons you can learn from the Tommy Lloyds, the Dusty Mays, I could go through a whole list of coaches that I think it's like, is it more value to be spending time around those people, learning, taking that in, or is the money that you're receiving more important?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think about.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, time will tell. I mean, by the time we, go into next week's episode, the landscape of NIL and the portal can change, right? We know that it's coming up this week. Aaron, let's take it back to that other slide regarding the Final Four. I want to give big props, big shout out to George. You called South Carolina to beat UConn. I mean, that was remarkable. What did you think about that? What did you see that a lot of other people didn't see? And then we're going to get into your thoughts about the exchange between Dawn Staley and Gino.
Well, Dawn, me and her, we go way back. So she told me she was going to get that W. So I had to.
She didn't get robbed.
Not get robbed.
I just knew that they saw last year's game, and UConn whooped up on them last year in the national championship. And so I knew Coach Staley was going to have her girls ready. I'm sure they watched film. I'm sure they had time to prep for Sarah Strong. And they were physical. They were aggressive. They made everything hard for UConn. UConn didn't make shots. And as you know, in basketball, if you're not making shots, it's going to be a long night for you. And so
Yeah.
you have to make shots. You have to, especially against a team who's physical. If you are getting into the paint and you're kicking it for open threes, you have to make those.
Yeah.
And if you're not making those, it's going to be a hard game. And so, shout out to them. It's unfortunate that they didn't win the national championship, but it was a great game. Me being a South Carolina native, I was definitely smiling from ear to ear.
What did you think about the exchange at the end of the game?
I think Gino's obviously wrong. I think there was a little bit of a complex, maybe, him losing to Don, and Gino's been on top. We talked about this a few weeks ago. He's been on top for years. He's been at UConn since 1984, and so he doesn't want to lose,
Right,
to anyone. And so I don't know the exchange, and social media, they're going to blow it up. Obviously, Don shook his hand before the game, and so I think it just got blown out of proportion. I don't think Don was wrong, but hopefully, they can kiss and make up and figure it out moving forward.
they will for sure. I mean, what are your thoughts, Aaron?
I think just the heat of the moment can sometimes get the best of us. And it's like, how do you kind of get control of yourself? I think George articulated it well. I mean, when you are great and you perform at that level, when things don't go as planned, obviously that frustration had been building all game because it was not like a game that they had played all year. And so I think they were surprised, and then I think the tensions just run high, and I think he just couldn't get control of himself enough to just at the end of the game say, hey, great job, and move on. Mm-hmm. So you gotta have a lot of self-discipline to not let those moments take you over.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Both of you are right. My final thoughts on it is it's really like I totally understand where Gino was coming from. He ran the table. They were undefeated going into the game. They're the dynasty, and I don't have a problem at the end of the game chirping and kind of trash talking. But once when cooler heads prevail, like if he would have, even if the next day he would have just given a press conference and, hey, listen, I want to give a big shout out to Coach Staley. They played a great game. Big shout out to those girls. They did a great job. We're a forgiving nation, right? Just own it. Don't be a dick. I mean, at the end of the day, like if you're caught up in the moment, I get it. I'll give you some grace. But if you just take it to the, and don't acknowledge it, I just think it makes you look bad. Because now what people are starting to go after him about his age. Maybe he's too old. Maybe the game has passed him by. Maybe he's, now the critics are going to come out. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Is just own it. I'm cool with you losing your cool, but just own it, apologize, give props where it needs to be, and then just move on from there. So from there, we got to talk about.
We cannot not celebrate UCLA.
I was just going to say, we got to talk about UCLA.
Congrats to them.
They were kind of I wouldn't say they were a dark horse, but they were not in the top. I mean, they made it to the Final Four. But I think a lot of people were looking at UConn. We even talked about it. I addressed it that, you just got to shoot for second place. But little do we know that UConn was going to go down. UCLA played an incredible game. They came in. Everybody played. Pistons were firing. George, what do you have to say about UCLA basketball, women's basketball?
They were experienced. They had a lot of experienced players, and so that goes to show if you have veteran players, you can win big. And a lot of people didn't really get to see UCLA until the NCAA tournament, because of them being out on the West Coast. And Coach Close, I started to study her a little bit and how passionate she is and how soft-spoken she is and how she cares about her players. I see why people, those young ladies wanted to go play for her.
Sure.
And she's a really good coach. And they had one of the best players in the country in Lauren Betts. And so when you have someone that is versatile like her, that can score, that can pass and is a force down low, it's going to be hard to stop her. And
Right.
kind of similar to Sarah Strong, when you have someone in women's basketball that can do that, you can play through her. And so I think, they had a good game plan. They kept feeding her the ball early and they wore South Carolina down. So, good game plan for them.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Aaron?
Shout out to our Aurora native here from Colorado. She won, I think, outstanding player of the tournament. Lauren Betts. I mean, just incredible. You're right. Like when you're that versatile, it's very hard in the women's game to shut that down. And I was with you. I started to really follow the coach, Corey Close. I think she actually was an assistant under Gino in Connecticut. I don't know her whole pedigree, but there was a quote that kept floating around, talent is our floor, character is our ceiling. And, being a blueprint to blue chip with our, character, integrity, and discipline with every step, like that just resonates with me. And there's something very powerful about somebody that just commands that without being loud, without being boisterous, but she commanded those respect to those young ladies. And you could tell. And just to your point, the experience. I think a large portion of the starting five, I think, were seniors.
Yeah.
So when you're that experienced, that's also an advantage for you as well. So kudos to them. I think it was incredible. And shout out to our friend Johnny Perkins, because he was calling UCLA the whole way. So Johnny, that one was for you. Congrats. You knew UCLA was going to win it.
Right on. Yeah, that goes to say when you have experienced talent like UCLA women's basketball, and very similar to what men's Indiana, right, with the average age, I think there was 24, and a lot of these guys were 4th, 5th year seniors. So they brought experience and they brought talent. Aaron, to your point, she actually, Corey Close, played at Santa Barbara. She was an assistant at UCLA. Then she was an assistant coach at Santa Barbara and Florida State before she got the job at UCLA. So she did not play under or coach underneath Gino.
Oh,
but,
I got that wrong. Sorry.
No, it's fine. She did I had to look her up too, because I wasn't sure if that was the case, because that would have been an interesting championship if those two would have met. Awesome. From there, let's move on to UNC. They got themselves a new head coach. He won a championship at the NBA with the Denver Nuggets, and now he's at UNC. And I think his reported salary is around $8 million, so they're paying for it. George, is there pressure at UNC? You're always going to be in the shadow of Dean Smith. You got to win yesterday, or is he going to have time to build?
First of all, I love Mike Malone. I love what he did with the Nuggets. When I was coaching, I watched a lot of his film just to see how he utilized Jokic in the pick and rolls at the top of the key, at the elbows. And he's going to do some great things at North Carolina. There's always pressure. There's always pressure. The North Carolinas, the Villanovas, the Kansases, Kentucky, all the Blue Bloods, Duke. There's always pressure, pressure when you wake up, pressure when you go to sleep. And so if you're a top 5 program, there's always going to be pressure. So you have to embrace that. But I do think in today's NIL landscape, he will have the resources. People will donate. People will support, obviously, because of it's North Carolina. That baby blue and white runs deep. But this is the first hire outside of the North Carolina tree for a while. And so him just making sure that he resonates to a lot of the North Carolina donors and a lot of the North Carolina supporters is going to be the one thing that he has to kind of be his hurdle. But I think he'll do a great job there.
Awesome. Aaron, what are your thoughts? You're a Denver Nuggets fan.
I am a Denver Nuggets fan. I think it's going to be great. I was kind of surprised when the Denver Nuggets fired him, to be quite honest. Not that that's the topic of discussion here, but, I love that his daughter actually plays volleyball at UNC. Mm-hmm. So he has ties, I think, to the school through her. But I agree with George. I think he's going to bring a lot to that program. I think it's going to be good to see, I think, that translation. UNC's now got 2 ex-professional coaches in their ranks between Belichick now, Mike. So let's hope Mike fares better and turns the program around. And I would also say, I think one of the interesting facts, I think I saw this, was, they spent 20 million on their roster and they were out in the first round. So I think these schools are going to have to really reevaluate, I think, their spend and how much they're willing to put out there, knowing, everything's a gamble. You don't know how far you're going to go, but I think a lot of this, I think they need to take a page out of the book we talked about last week with the Texas softball player. Let's pay these kids after they perform and reward them with money then, versus let's hope you go out and do the job we need you to do this year to get us to a championship. So,
yep. Coach Malone hasn't been at the college ranks since 2001 when he was at Manhattan. So he spent the last 25 years in the NBA. It's obvious. It's an obvious question, George. Has the college game changed, and is he prepared for it with the NIL and the transfer portal?
Yeah, it has changed. But if you're going to North Carolina, you're going for two things. You're going to win a national championship, and you're going to hopefully become an NBA player. And so he has that NBA pedigree. He knows how to coach NBA-type players. He knows how to develop NBA-type players, and he's going to bring a staff that has had NBA experience. And so I think he's going to run it like an NBA franchise.
Got it.
Bringing in, the resources that will help these young men become professionals. And I know not everyone's going to be an NBA player, but he can get 3 to 4 NBA type players every year, put in a great system for them, and do some special things.
Sure. How great is it to be? I'm not sure how much recruiting he does as a head coach, but can you imagine walking into the living room of some, high school or some kid and just show him your NBA ring? That carries a lot of weight.
Exactly.
What about you? What are your thoughts? Do you think the college game has changed? Do you think he's prepared for it?
I think it's actually probably more suited now for guys probably like him, and he's a little bit more cutting it. Like, I don't think he's so old school. I think like a Belichick, I think it's a harder adapting than I think it's going to be for Mike. And so I think it has changed a lot. You have to, and I think there's more changes coming within this space. How often can kids transfer? The age of the kids that they're going to allow, where we don't see this 27-year-old, 9th year of eligibility kind of stuff going on. So I think that'll help also level set the game as well. But I do think the landscape of college sports has changed. I think just how do you adapt? But I think we got to return and remember we're here to develop these young men and women. And that should be the primary focus of any coaches. How am I helping these young human beings become the best version of themselves and impacting them in an incredible way? And so take a page out of Corey Close's book, because I think those coaches are the ones long-term are going to excel and have the ability, I think, to repeat, because that's what people are going to gravitate towards.
Mm-hmm. Well, Coach Malone, definitely, you're right, George. He has the NBA pedigree. He knows how to groom or prepare these kids for to play at the next level. I think the days of the Coach K's, the Lute Olsons, those days are a little bit behind us. You're going to see Rick Pitino, Coach Pitino, Tom Izzo, Calipari still kind of hovering, but I think those guys are finding the transfer portal and the NIL a little bit frustrating, because it does, think about these, like once you got somebody at Michigan State or once you got somebody at St. John's, you knew you had them for 2 or 3 years. Now these coaches, even if you're Tom Izzo, you got to re-recruit these guys at the end of the year from your own roster. And sometimes these coaches see that they're star players in the transfer portal without even having a conversation with the athlete. Just they have to hear about it on Twitter or something like that. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Coach Malone does. It's going to be an exciting time. And what's our next slide? The future is in the portal. George, what are your thoughts on the landscape of what's going to happen with NIL and the portal? Do you think they're going to lock it down? Do you think it's still going to be the wild, wild west, or just simply a race to the bottom?
The wild, wild west. The wild, wild west. I see it. every day. You know, I'm constantly looking at the portal, trying to find quality basketball players that can have great professional careers. And it's crazy because there's kids that are in the portal, and I don't know their story. You know, everyone has a different story, but if you are getting 3 minutes a game, you're not going to go to a place that was better than the place that you average 3 minutes a game at.
Yeah.
Like coaches are going to look at film, you know, and I think the portal is great for the small college, the small Division I players who kill it and can level up. I think it's really good for those Division II, Division III NAIA players that kill it for their respective schools, and now they have an opportunity to now go make some money on a Division I level. And so if it's doing that, I'm all for it. But for some of these players who are not putting in the time, they're just disgruntled with their coaches and they want to move to something better. I have a problem with that. So it's there has to be some regulation to it. People have talked about, you know, some of these colleges maybe buying out contracts, buying out NIL contracts. But until the higher ups in the NCAA put their heads together to figure it out, it's going to continue looking like this. And there's so many players when by the time school starts, there's going to be like 50% of the players who are in the portal not find homes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point.
What are your thoughts, Aaron?
Well, I here's my thoughts on this. I think there's an opportunity to, I think, really level up as coaches. So one of the things that struck me with this whole opening of the transfer portal for the basketball side is the Tennessee Volunteers ended up with 0 players on their roster. And that's
women's,
on the women's side. And that's due to bad coaching. The girls did not like the coach. They don't like her. And so I think there's an opportunity for coaches, to level up, step up, and then how truthful and honest are you going to be with these players? I mean, you can say this is the way it's going to, here's how many minutes, here's the time I can give you, whatever they say to these guys. I'm not the expert in that. So, but you then have to make sure that the student athlete understands you have to show up and you have to perform every day in order for you to earn your spot out here on the floor. Mm-hmm. And so I think this gives coaches an opportunity to go, okay, if I'm amazing and if I'm really developing this talent and I'm making sure that these young athletes understand what they need in order for them to be playing within my organization, you're going to have a top tier program regardless. And these kids are going to ultimately respect you. I do think, there's an opportunity for us to, I think what's coming with you don't get to transfer every year, you get one transfer and then you're starting to sit out. Mm-hmm. I think we've got to help these young athletes understand too, like you've got to work through some adversity. Yeah, you're a freshman. I go to UNC. Yeah, maybe I'm not getting a ton of playing time. And maybe that has to come down the road of what's year 2, 3, 4 look like. And am I playing what we talk about at Blueprint to Blue Chip is the long game. Am I in this for the long haul or am I in this to try to have glory, the second I step on the campus and I want to have time at playing. So I think there's an opportunity, I think, to level set on both sides and to use this to really grow and up level, I think, in humans and individuals on both sides of the ball, whether it's the coach or the player.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's an exciting time right now, but I think the real proof that's in the pudding is going to be in a couple of years. I think that something that people, you, Aaron, you and I have talked about it, and George, you've kind of shared this sentiment in the past, like, it's so important for these athletes to understand by staying at one place, they develop roots and to be able to take advantage of the alumni and the boosters post playing career, right? Because a lot of these guys, these young men and women aren't going to go on to play. And if you've spent 2 or 3 years jumping around at different campuses, you have no real allegiance. And then when the NIL money and the starts running out and you didn't make it to the pros, what then? When you know, your eligibility is up, you still have 2 years left of college, and the scholarship's not going to pay for that anymore. So I really hope these young men and women have a little foresight and have good people in their corner like George and Aaron and myself to guide these kids to say, hey, look, let's play the long game here. Because I'm really afraid of what's going to happen when some of these kids are 25, 26 years old. The money's over. They don't have the shelf life they did. They don't have strong roots to a university. And then, Aaron, you talk about it all the time, that 78% of pro athletes go broke or bankrupt after 5 years leaving the game. So, when these kids, George, my next question regarding the NIL and maybe more of that than the transfer portal, if it's starting to bleed down to high school and some of these high school kids are making 6 figures, are they even hungry anymore? They're getting paid. So are they still getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go do the Kobe Bryant hit in the gym, or are they just getting a little soft? What are your thoughts on that?
The great ones are still doing it. The great ones are, but it is getting watered down. You see it in AAU. When I go to an AAU game, it's crazy. It's crazy the amount of players that really are not skilled. They're just athletic.
Right.
A lot of them don't even know how to make a proper post entry. And so they lack the mechanics, they lack the skill, they lack the focus. And just like you said, they're chasing the bag. And I'm all for it. I'm all for you doing that if you're going to continue to do that once the basketball stops bouncing. Where are you? What are you doing to elevate yourself to make more money? What are you doing to elevate yourself to now set yourself up for 30, 40 years down the road so that you don't have to scratch and claw for the things that you want? So I blame a little bit on the parents. I blame a little bit on the coaches. And so it's not all the student athletes' fault, because if you can push a student athlete, they will do what they need to do. But if the parents are soft, if the coach is soft, then these kids are going to take advantage of that.
No doubt. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I love the parenting point. Like, we've created kind of a soft generation, and there's some, I think, work we need to do. And I say that because I'm a parent, to make these kids more resilient and tough, as well as, it's great. I always want people to be paid for their talent and their skills. But I think there's a double-edged sword. The skills you have on the basketball court are not the skills that are going to get you your entry-level job once the ball starts bouncing and you're now applying to work. Whatever organization that is, entry-level jobs are not going to pay you what NIL money is paying you. And that's just reality. That doesn't mean you're less talented. But again, that mental mindset is there. And so they don't know. They think they're now less worthy because the pay now matches their skill set of where they're truly at. And so I think there's going to be a lot of work we need to do psychologically with these young men and women, because that's a big change. How do I make $500,000 sitting on the bench thinking I'm a great talent here because they have money to pay me, and now I have to go get a job and I'm going to work it. And this is my starting job at, corporation
Enterprise.
X. Yeah. And guess what? That's 50, maybe 60,000. I mean, well, double of what I made at exiting college, but those are entry-level jobs. You're not going to make what a senior executive is making is an organization. They've worked to get there. That's people in organizations making money. If you're in the corporate world, have spent a lot of time getting to that level. That wasn't just handed to them. That comes with years of experience and a resume. And I think that's the danger I see is to George's point is like, these kids don't have a resume for some of the money that we're paying them. And so then the real world translation, I think, is going to hit them really hard. And then the other point I want to make, and then I'll toss it back to you, Thomas, is there's this mismanagement of funds. You know, how do you get an $180,000 NIL check and you're broke within 6 months? Like, that's not how the real world is going to work. You know, most of the time you're not going to get paid up front. You're going to have to go show up, work your 2 weeks, get your 2-week paycheck, you know, and so we're setting these guys up for failure. You know what? What do you need? How can you still have fun in college? You're on a full ride scholarship. Give yourself $2,000 in play money and the rest of it socked away, you know, because you have your other expenses. Delayed gratification, live in the dorms, eat the dorm food or the meals on campus. Like, you don't need to go be buying a Bentley and, you know, a $5,000 a month apartment. Like, we've got to really help these guys out because they could have incredible seed money to start their own companies, you name it. But who's having these conversations? That's not happening.
Yeah, right. Well, totally agree with you on that one. George, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, there's so many people getting mismanaged, but I do shout out the ones that are, you know, taking advantage of this, putting their money into things that will accumulate, you know, whether it's real estate, whether it's stocks, whether it's, you know, different avenues in the business world. For instance, like I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, Armando Bacot. He invested his NIL money in hotels. You know, if you're investing your money, like Seth Trimble, I think it's Seth Trimble, he invested money into Baskin Robbins. He invested money into different townhouses. So putting your money into different avenues, your money is making more money, that's fine. But why do you want, just as Aaron said, buying this Bentley? As soon as you drive that car off the lot, that thing depreciates.
Right.
You know, versus you buying, you know, some homes close to the campus, you know you're going to have occupancy. Get you some land, get some townhouses built, and now you're set for pretty much life.
Yeah. You know, unfortunately, you know, a lot of times when I talk to these athletes, you know, if I'm talking to an 18-year-old, I say, look, I've been 18, you haven't been 55, right? And if I talk to a 20 or 21-year-old athlete, I say the same thing. Look, I've been 20, 21, you haven't been 55. So I think that what we're all talking about in theory is we're talking to the three of us as our audience, right? These young kids, they think the money's going to keep coming. They think they're going to be able to play for, you know, forever. Unfortunately, I think, Aaron, you know, to your point earlier, I think the only real answer is to take a page out of the lady's book and you get paid for your performance, not your potential, because then I think you're really setting these athletes up. And this is going to be a perfect segue in. We've gone well past 30 minutes. And George, I appreciate your time. Aaron, I appreciate your time. And I'm sure the audience of 2 million people that are watching us, they've stopped what they're doing to listen to what we have to say. But, you know, one of the things that we've got coming up, George, and we're super excited about, we may have shared it with you, is we have what's called Path to the Pros. Aaron and I have developed another webinar because one of the questions, some of the questions we get from parents and young athletes is, what do I need to do to make it to the pros? And the real answer is we don't have that answer, but we tell you what you can't do, and you can't take shortcuts, you can't cut corners, and you can't check boxes. You're going to have to do the work. And if you think that NIL is going to be able to pay your way to performance, it's not going to happen. So we have a nice arsenal of former, retired, and current athletes that are going to come on and talk. George, we'd love to have you on there again because we know that you've coached athletes, you've seen them, and I'm sure there's a handful of athletes that you said you knew they were going to go to the next level. And then probably as a coach, you know, like this athlete's probably never going to dribble a ball again after college. And that's okay too, but you got to be set up for success, and that's the bottom line. So George, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again. Aaron, thank you. Team, thanks so much for joining us. We hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next Friday for Flex Friday.
Okay, and I'm going to shamelessly plug our first episode is live on August April 16th. April 16th. So next Thursday, every Thursday night, we're going to go live. You're going to get to ask those pros those questions. So
Awesome.
you get to sit with them. So thanks again.
Excellent.
Love it.
George, Aaron, thank you.
Thank you.